The flag of Portugal is the national flag of the Portuguese Republic. It is a rectangular bicolour with a field unevenly divided into green on the hoist, and red on the fly. The lesser version of the national coat of arms is centred over the colour boundary at equal distance from the upper and lower edges. On June 30, 1911, less than a year after the downfall of the constitutional monarchy, this design was officially adopted for the new national flag, after selection by a special commission whose members included Columbano Bordalo Pinheiro, João Chagas and Abel Botelho. The conjugation of the new field colours, especially the use of green, was not traditional in the Portuguese national flag's composition and represented a radical republican-inspired change that broke the bond with the former religious monarchical flag. Since a failed Republican insurrection on January 31, 1891, red and green had been established as the colours of the Portuguese Republican Party and its associated movements, whose political prominence kept growing until it reached a culmination period following the Republican Revolution of October 5, 1910. In the ensuing decades, these colours were popularly propagandized as representing the hope of the nation and the blood of those who died defending it, as a means to endow them with a more patriotic and dignified, therefore less political, sentiment. The current flag design represents a dramatic change in the evolution of the Portuguese standard, which had always been closely associated with the royal arms. Since the country's foundation, the national flag developed from the blue cross on white armorial square banner of King Afonso I to the liberal monarchy's arms over a blue and white rectangle. In between, major changes associated with determinant political events contributed to its evolution into the current design. The decree that legally replaced the flag used under the constitutional monarchy with a new design was approved by the Constituent Assembly and published in Government Diary No. 141, on June 19, 1911. On June 30, this decree had its regulations officially published in Government Diary No. 150. Construction. The flag's length is equal to 1 or 2 times its width, which translates into an aspect ratio of 2 to 3. The background is vertically divided into 2 colors, dark green on the hoist side, and scarlet red on the fly. The color division is made in a way that green spans 2/5 of the length and the remaining 3/5 are filled by red. The lesser version of the national coat of arms a white-rimmed national shield on top of a black highlighted yellow armillary sphere is positioned over the border between both colors. The armillary sphere has a diameter equal to 1 or 2 width and is equidistant from the upper and lower edges of the flag. The sphere, drawn in perspective, possesses 6 edge-embossed arcs, 4 of which are great circles and 2 are small circles. The great circles represent the ecliptic, the equator, and 2 meridians. These last 3 are positioned so that the intersections between each 2 arcs make a right angle. 1 meridian lies on the flag's plane while the other is perpendicular to it. The small circles consist of 2 parallels, each tangent to one of the ecliptic meridian intersections. Vertically centered over the sphere is the national shield, a white-rimmed curved-bottom red shield charged with a white escutcheon. Its height and width are equal to 7/10 and 6/10 of the sphere's diameter, respectively. The shield is positioned in a way that its limits intersect the sphere, at the inflection points of the distal edges of the Tropic of Cancer's anterior half and Tropic of Capricorn's posterior half. At the intersection of the lower edges of the ecliptic's posterior half and of the equator's anterior half. And, at the intersection of the upper edge of the ecliptic's anterior half with the lower edge of the equator's posterior half. A curious aspect of the official design is the absence of a segment of the Tropic of Capricorn, between the national shield and the ecliptic arc. The white escutcheon is itself charged with 5 smaller blue shields arranged like a Greek cross. Each kna holds 5 white bezants displayed in the form of a satire. The red bordure is charged with 7 yellow castles, 3 on the chief portion, 2 in the middle points of each quadrant of the curved base, and 2 more on each side of the bordure, over the flag's horizontal middle line. Each castle is composed by a base building, showing a closed gate, on top of which stand 3 battlemented towers. In heraldic terminology, the shield's blazon is described as argent, 5 escutcheons in cross azure each charged with 5 plates in satire, on a bordure gules 7 towers triple turreted or, 3 in chief A. The color tones of the flag are not accurately specified in any legal document. Approximate tones are listed below. Background. The Republican Revolution of October 5, 1910, brought a need to replace the symbols of the overthrown monarchy, represented in the first instance by the old national flag and anthem. The choice of the new flag was not one without conflict, especially over the colors, as partisans of the Republican red and green faced opposition from supporters of the traditional royal blue and white. Blue also carried a strong religious meaning as it was the color of Our Lady of the Conception, who was crowned Queen and Patroness of Portugal by King John IV, so its removal or replacement from the future flag was justified by Republicans as one of the many measures needed to secularize the state. After the presentation and discussion of the many proposals, a governmental commission was set up on October 15, 1910. It included Columbano Bordalo Pinheiro, João Chagas, Abel Botelho and 2 military leaders of 1910, Ladislau Pereira and Afonso Pala. This commission ultimately chose the red and green of the Portuguese Republican Party, delivering an explanation based on patriotic reasons, which disguised the political significance behind the choice, as these had been the colors present on the banners of the rebellious during the Republican insurrection of January 31, 1891, in Porto, and during the monarchy overthrowing revolution, in Lisbon. The commission considered that red should be present as one of the main colors, because it is the battling, warm, virile color, par excellence. It is the color of conquest and laughter. A singing, burning, joyful color recalls the idea of blood and urges to achieve victory. An explanation for the inclusion of the green was harder to come up with, given that it was not a traditional color of the Portuguese flag's history. Eventually, it was justified on the grounds that, during the 1891 insurrection, this was the color present on the revolutionary flag that sparked the redeeming lightning of republicanism. Finally, white represented a beautiful and fraternal color, into which all other colors merged themselves, color of simplicity, of harmony and peace, adding that it is this same color that, charged with enthusiasm and faith by the Red Cross of Christ, marks the Discovery's epic cycle. The Manuelan armillary sphere, which had been present on the national flag under the reign of John VI, was revived because it consecrated the Portuguese epic maritime history, the ultimate challenge, essential to our collective life. The Portuguese shield was kept, being positioned over the armillary sphere. Its presence would immortalize the human miracle of positive bravery, tenacity, diplomacy, and audacity, that managed to bind the first links of the Portuguese nation's social and political affirmation, since it is one of the most vigorous symbols of the national identity and integrity. The new flag was produced in large numbers at the Corderia Nacional and was officially presented nationwide on December 1, 1910, on occasion of the 270 years of the Restoration of Independence. This day had already been declared by the government as the Flag Day. In the capital, it was paraded from the City Hall to the Restauradors Monument, where it was hoisted. This festive presentation did not mask, however, the turmoil caused by a design chosen single-handedly without prior popular consultation, and that represented more of a political regime than a whole nation. To encourage a greater acceptance of the new flag, the government issued all teaching establishments with one exemplar, whose symbols were to be explained to the students. Textbooks were changed to intensively display these symbols. Also, December 1, January 31 and October 5 were declared national holidays. Symbolism. The Portuguese flag displays 3 important symbols, the field colours, and the armillary sphere and national shield, which make up the coat of arms. Colours. The explanation for the green and red colors that make up the background field arose during the Estado Novo period, the nationalist authoritarian regime that held power from 1933 to 1974. It claims that the green represented the hope of the Portuguese people, while the red represented the blood of those who died serving the nation. Sources believe these noble meanings are far from the truth and are nothing more than propaganda, to provide an honorable justification to their choice. despite the fact that these colors never constituted a major part of the national flag until 1910, they were present in several historical banners during important periods. King John I included a green of his cross on the red border of his banner. The Red Cross of the Order of Christ was used over a white field as a naval pennon during the discoveries and frequently on ship sails. A green background version was a popular standard of the rebellious during the 1640 revolution that restored Portugal's independence from Spain. There are no registered sources to confirm that this was the origin of the Republican colors. Another explanation gives full credit to the flag that was hoisted on the balcony of Porto's City Hall during the 1891 insurrection. It consisted of a red field bearing a green disc and the inscription Centro Democrático Federal a 15 de Novembro, representing one of many Masonry-inspired Republican clubs. Over the following 20 years, the red and green was present on every Republican item in Portugal. The 1891 flag inherited red stands for the color of the Republican-inspired Masonry-backed revolutionaries, whereas green was the color Auguste Comte destined to be present in the flags of positivist nations, an ideal incorporated into the Republican political matrix. Armillary sphere. The armillary sphere was an important astronomical and navigational instrument for the Portuguese sailors who ventured into unknown seas, during the Age of Discoveries. It was introduced by the Knights Templar, whose knowledge was essential to the Portuguese discoverers. Henry, the navigator, the great responsible for the development of Age of Discovery, was actually the Grand Master of the Order of Christ. It became, thus, the symbol of the most important period of the national the Portuguese discoveries. In light of this, King Manuel I, who ruled during this period, incorporated the armillary sphere into his personal banner. It was simultaneously used as the ensign of ships plying the route between the metropolis and Brazil, thus becoming a colonial symbol and a fulcral element of the flags of the future Brazilian kingdom and empire. Adding to the sphere's significance was its common use on every Manilan-influenced architectural work, where it is one of the major stylistic elements, as seen on the Gira Cube Nimos Monastery and Bila Copyright M Tower. Portuguese shield. The Portuguese shield rests over the armillary sphere. Except during the reign of Afonso I, it is present in every single historical flag, in one form or another. It is the prime Portuguese symbol as well as one of the oldest, with the first elements of today's shield appearing during the reign of Sancho I. The evolution of the Portuguese flag is inherently associated with the evolution of the shield. Within the white escutcheon, the 5 quinnas with their 5 white bezants representing the 5 wounds of Christ when crucified and are popularly associated with the miracle of Eurique. The story associated with this miracle tells that before the Battle of Eurique, an old hermit appeared before Count Afonso Henriques as a divine messenger. He foretold Afonso's victory and assured him that God was watching over him and his peers. The messenger advised him to walk away from his camp, alone, if he heard a nearby chapel bell tolling, in the following night. In doing so, he witnessed an apparition of Jesus on the cross. Ecstatic, Afonso heard Jesus promising victories for the coming battles, as well as God's wish to act through Afonso, and his descendants, in order to create an empire which would carry his name to unknown lands, thus choosing the Portuguese to perform great tasks. Boosted by this spiritual experience, Afonso won the battle against an outnumbering enemy. Legend has it that Afonso killed the 5 Moorish kings of the Seville, Badajoz, Elvas, Apamalvora and Bijatafas, before decimating the enemy troops. Hence, in gratitude to Jesus, he incorporated 5 shields arranged in a cross representing his divine-led victory over the 5 enemy kings with each one carrying Christ's 5 wounds in the form of silver bezants. The sum of all bezants would give 30, symbolizing Judas Iscariot's 30 pieces of silver. However, evidence pointing out that the number of bezants on each kna was greater than 5 during long periods following Afonso I's reign, as well as the fact that only in the 15th century was this legend registered on a chronicle by Ferner Pound o Lopes, support this explanation as one of pure myth and highly charged with patriotic feeling in the sense that Portugal was created by divine intervention and was destined for great things. The 7 castles are traditionally considered a symbol of the Portuguese victories over their Moorish enemies, under Afonso III, who supposedly captured 7 enemy fortresses in the course of his conquest of the Algarve, concluded in 1249. However, this explanation is weakly founded since this king did not have 7 castles on his banner, but an unspecified number. Some reconstructions display about 16 castles. This number changed to 12, in 1385, and was only fixed at 7 in 1485. An hypothesis about the origin of the castles on a red border lies in the family ties of Afonso III with Castile, whose arms consisted of a golden castle on a red field. Evolution. Since the foundation of Portugal, the national flag was always linked to the royal arms and, up until 1640, there was no official distinction between both. It evolved in a way that gradually incorporated most of the symbols present on the current coat of arms. 1095 Euro 1248. The first heraldic symbol that can be associated with what would become the Portuguese nation was on this shield used by Henry of Burgundy, Count of Portugal since 1095, during his battles with the Moors. This shield consisted of a blue cross over a white field. Nevertheless, this design has no reliable sources since it is a reconstruction that became popular and widely accepted thanks to the nationalistic purposes of the Estado Novo regime. Henry's son Afonso Henriques succeeded him in the county and took on the same shield. In 1139, despite being outnumbered, he defeated an army of Almoravid Moors at the Battle of Ourique and proclaimed himself Afonso I, King of Portugal, in front of his troops. Following the official recognition by the neighboring Liquiden, Afonso changed his shield in order to reflect his new political status. Sources state he charged the cross with 5 sets of 11 silver bezants, 1 set on the center and 1 on each arm, symbolizing Afonso's newly gained right to issue currency. During the time of Afonso I, it was typical not to repair battle damage inflicted on the shield, so changes such as the breaking off of pieces, color shifting or stains were very common. When Sancho I succeeded his father Afonso I, in 1185, he inherited a very worn-off shield. The blue-stained leather that made the cross had been lost except where the bezants held it in place. This involuntary degradation was the basis for the next step on the evolution of the national coat of arms, where a plain blue cross transformed into a compound cross of 5 blue bezant charged escutcheons Euro. The quinnes were thus born. Sancho's personal shield consisted of a white field with a compound cross of 5 quinnes with the bottom edges of the lateral ones facing towards the center. Both Sancho's son Afonso II and grandson Sancho II used these arms, as it was usual with direct succession lines. A new modification of the royal arms was made when Sancho II's younger brother became king, in 1248. 1248 Euro 1495. Afonso III of Portugal was not the eldest son, therefore heraldic practices stated he should not take his father's arms without adding a personal variation. Before becoming king, Afonso was married to Matilda II of Boulogne, but her inability to provide him with a royal heir led Afonso to divorce her, in 1253. He then married Beatrice of Castile, an illegitimate daughter of Alfonso X of Castile. It is more likely that it was this family connection with Castile that justified the new heraldic addition to the royal arms a red border charged with an undetermined number of yellow castless rather than the definitive conquest of the Algarve and its Moorish fortresses, considering that the number of castles was only fixed in the late 16th century. The inner portion contained the arms of Sancho I, although the number of bezants varied between 7, 11 and 16. This same design was used by the Portuguese kings until the end of the First Dynasty, in 1383. A succession crisis put the country at war with Castile and left it without a ruler for 2 years. In 1385, in the wake of the Battle of Aljubarrota, a second dynasty was founded when John, Master of the Order of Aviz and illegitimate son of King Peter I, acceded to the throne as John I. To his personal banner, John I added his order's fleur-de-lis cross, displayed as green flowery points on the red border. This inclusion reduced the number of castles to 12. The number of bezants in each escutcheon was reduced from 11 to 7. This banner lasted 100 years until John I's great-grandson John II restyled it, in 1485, introducing important changes, the removal of the Aviz cross, a downward arrangement and edge smoothing of the quinners, and the definitive fixing of 5 satire-arranged bezoarts in each quina and 7 castles on the bordure. John II's banner was the last armorial square banner used as the national flag or standard. Following his death, in 1495, radical changes were made by his successor. 1495–1667. John II was succeeded by his first cousin Manuel I, in 1495. This king was the first to convert the traditional square armorial banner into a rectangular field with a coat of arms on its center. Specifically, the flag was now a white rectangle centrally charged with a coat of arms on an ogival or heater-shaped shield and surmounted by an open royal crown. This flag was used exclusively as the kingdom's banner since Manuel I possessed a personal standard which included the armillary sphere for the first time. In 1578, during the reign of Sebastian and on the eve of the fatal Battle of Alcaçarquibir, the flag was again modified. The number of castles was permanently fixed at 7 and the royal crown was converted into a closed 3-arched crown, which symbolized a stronger royal authority. With Sebastian Poundo's death and the short-lived reign of his great-uncle Cardinal Henry, in 1580, a dynastic crisis was solved with the Spanish King Philip II acceding to the Portuguese throne as Philip I, installing a Spanish dynasty. The accession was made on the condition that Portugal was ruled as a separate, autonomous state, not as a province. This was fulfilled as Portugal and Spain formed a personal union under Philip I and his successors. A consequence of this administrative situation was the maintenance of the flag created under Sebastian's reign as the Portuguese national flag, while Spain had its own. As the ruling house in Portugal, the Habsburg banner also included the Portuguese arms. The country regained its independence from Spain, in 1640, in a coup d'état copyright act that placed on the throne John, Duke of Bragança Section A, as King John IV. Under his rule, the national flag was slightly changed as the ogival shield became rounded. It was from this reign forward that the royal arms and the kingdom's arms became separate banners. 1667–1830. When Afonso VI's younger brother Peter II replaced him on the throne, in 1667, he adapted the flag's crown to fit the contemporary trends by transforming it into a 5-arched crown. The new flag did not remain unchanged for too long, as it was refurbished by Peter's son John V, after he took the throne, in 1707. Heavily influenced by the luxurious and ostentatious court of the French King Louis XIV, and by France's political and cultural impact in Europe, John V wanted to transpose such style into the country's coat of arms. A red beret was added under the crown and the rounded shield was converted to a Samnitic shield. Instated by an absolute monarch like John V, this flag endured through almost the entire absolutist period in Portugal. John V, Joseph I and Maria I. At the time of Queen Maria's death, the royal family was living in Brazil, having fled from Portugal after it was invaded by Napoleon's imperial army, in 1807. The Portuguese colony had been elevated to kingdom, in 1815, and in doing so the ruler began using the title of Monarch of the United Kingdom of Portugal, Brazil and Algarves. Maria I's son, John VI, changed the nation's flag to reflect this new union. The coat of arms, whose shield became rounded again, now rested upon a blue-filled yellow armillary sphere surmounted by the same beret bearing 5-arched crown. Apart from the crown and white background, this design was the closest to the current one. 1830–1910. John VI died in Lisbon in 1826. His elder son Peter, who had declared the independence of Brazil in 1822, becoming Emperor Peter I, succeeded to the Portuguese throne as Peter IV. Because the new Brazilian constitution did not allow further personal unions of Portugal and Brazil, Peter abdicated the Portuguese crown in favour of his elder daughter Maria da Glaciuberia, who became Maria II of Portugal. She was only 7 years old, so Peter stated she would marry his brother Miguel, who would act as regent. However, in 1828, Miguel deposed Maria and proclaimed himself king, abolishing the 1822 liberal constitution and ruling as an absolute monarch. This started the period of the Liberal Wars. The Liberals formed a separate government exiled on the Azorian island of Terceira. This government issued 2 decrees establishing modifications to the national flag. While supporters of usurper King Miguel I still upheld the flag established by John VI, the liberal supporters imposed important changes on it. The background was equally divided along its length into blue and white. The armillary sphere was removed and the coat of arms was centered over the color boundary. And the shield reverted to the French type shape of John V. This new flag configuration was decreed solely for terrestrial use, but a variation of it was used as the national ensign. This ensign differed in the way the colors occupied the background with a consequent positional shift of the arms. With the defeat and exile of Miguel in 1834, Queen Maria II returned to the throne and the standard of the victorious side was hoisted in Lisbon as the new national flag. It would survive for 80 years, witnessing the last period of the Portuguese monarchy until its abolition, in 1910. Currently this flag is used by Portuguese monarchists. Flag Protocol, Legislation. The constitutional legislation concerning the use of the national flag is rather scarce and incomplete. In some cases, it still dates back to the beginning of the 20th century. The regulations for its military and naval use, however, are more recent and complete. A revision of the Decree No. 150, published on March 30, 1987, states that the flag is to be hoisted from 9:00 a.m. to sunset, on Sundays and national holidays, throughout the entire national territory. It can also be displayed on days where official ceremonies or other solemn public sessions are held. In this case, the flag is hoisted on site. The flag can be hoisted in other days if it is considered appropriate by the central government, or by other regional or local governing bodies, or by heads of private institutions. It must follow the official design standard and be preserved in good condition. On the headquarters buildings of sovereign bodies, the flag can stay hoisted on a daily basis. It can also be hoisted on civilian and military national monuments. On public buildings associated with the central, regional or local administration. And on headquarters of public corporations and institutions. Citizens and private institutions can also display it, on the condition that they respect the relevant legal procedures. In the facilities of nationally based international organizations or in the case of international meetings, the flag is hoisted according to the protocol used on those situations. If national mourning is declared, the flag will be flown at half-staff during the fixed amount of days. Any flag hoisted along with it will be flown in the same manner. When unfurled in the presence of other flags, the national flag must not have smaller dimensions and must be situated in a prominent, honorable place, according to the relevant protocol, 2 flag poles Euro right pole viewed by a person facing the exterior. 3 flag poles Euro central pole. More than 3 flag poles, within a building or Euro of odd number of poles, central pole. If even number, first pole on the right of the central point. Outside a building or Euro always the rightmost pole. If flag poles are not level, the flag must occupy the highest pole. The poles should be placed in honorable locations of the ground, building for section adders and roofs. On public acts where the flag is not hoisted, it can be suspended from a distinct spot, but never used as decoration, covering or for any purpose that can diminish its dignity. Penalties. An early decree, from December 28, 1910, established that any person who, through speech, published writings or any other public act, shows lack of respect to the national flag, which is the motherland's symbol, will be sentenced to a 3 to 12-month prison term with corresponding fine and, in case of relapse, will be sentenced to exile, as stated in the 62nd article of the Penal Code. In its 332nd article, the current Penal Code punishes infractions with a prison sentence of up to 2 years. If the sentence is shorter than 240 days, there is a formula for converting it into a fine. If the offence is directed towards regional symbols, the penalties are halved. Folding. During formal occasions, 4 people are required to properly fold the flag, where each person holds one of the sides. A correctly folded flag must be a square limiting the national shield. However, the order by which the different folding steps are performed to achieve this result is not legislated. The procedure begins with the flag fully extended and held in a horizontal plane with the obverse facing down. One of the possible folding sequences is demonstrated below. Military flags. Besides the state and civil flag, Portugal has a specific war flag which represents the national military forces on land. Note, however, that it is the state flag, and not the war flag, that is flown on military buildings and facilities. The war flag is mostly used on parades. Other flag variants are used by different high-ranked state officers connected to the government and the armed forces, national colours. The national standard used by the Portuguese armed forces differs from the design used for the civil flag, state flag and national ensign. The military flag, also adopted in 1911, is a rectangle measuring 1.20 meters in width and 1.30 meters in length. Green and red are positioned at the hoist and fly, respectively, but occupy the field in an equal manner. Centered over the color boundary lie the armillary sphere and Portuguese shield, surrounded by two yellow laurel branches intersecting at their stems. These are bound by a white stripe bearing the verse by Lua esta calma micronos esta copyrighted dito patria mini armada as the motto. This differs from the national coat of arms, where the laurel shoots are tied by green and red stripes. The sphere's outer diameter is a of the width and lies 35 centimeters from the upper edge and 45 centimeters from the lower edge. Although the 1911 regulation is, theoretically, still in force, the various branches of the armed forces made specific changes to it and so, several types of national standards are used by the different military units. For example, the national standards adopted by the Portuguese Army, in 1979, measure just 0.80 am by 0.80 am. Naval jack. The Portuguese naval jack is only hoisted at the prow of docked or anchored navy ships, from sunrise to sunset. The national flag is permanently hoisted at the stern, when sailing, and from sunrise to sunset, when docked. It is a square flag bearing a green-bordered red field with a minor coat of arms on the center. The width of the green border and the diameter of the armillary sphere are equal to 1/8 and 3/7 of the side's dimension, respectively. Government flags. Highly ranked state and governmental officers are also represented by their own flag. The President of the Republic uses a flag largely similar to the national flag, except for having dark green as the only background color. It is usually hoisted at the President's official residence, the Palace of Bela copyright M, as well as on the presidential car, as small-sized flags. The flag of the Prime Minister is a white rectangle with a dark green satire, holding the lesser coat of arms on its center, and a red border charged with a pattern of yellow laurel leaves. Other ministerial flags do not possess the red border. The flag of the Assembly of the Republic, the national parliament, is also a white rectangle with the lesser coat of arms in the center and a dark green border. See also, Portuguese vexillology, list of Portuguese flags, notes, from the original Portuguese blazon, de prata, cinco escudetes, de blor, postos cruz, cada carregado com cinco bizantes, de prata, postos aspa. Bordadura, de gules, carregada com cinco castelos, de oro, dos quatro quif. References. Further reading, Calho, Trindade. Manual Político do Cidadão Português. Porto, Embra Copyright Czar Literaria e Typográfica. OCLCA 6,129,820 Pinheiro, Columbano Bordalo. Bandeira Nacional, Modelo Aprovado pelo Governo Provisório da República Portuguesa. Lisbon, Imprensa Nacional. OCLCA 24,780,919. External links, Portugal at Flags of the World, Portuguese, Presidency of the Republic and a Euro official portal, Portuguese, Museum of the Presidency of the Republic.